You are watching Balkan Forum. This edition will be dedicated to the media freedom in the Western Balkans and the role of the EU in this respect. Media freedom in the region has declined quite sharply over the past year, despite EU incentive steps such as starting negotiation with Serbia and giving recommendation to start negotiation with Macedonia. Across the Western Balkans, the political battles that are most likely to compromise media freedom have intensified. Media owners, their publications and the journalists who work for them have come under massive pressure from political actors. Toby Vogel is now with us in the studio. Welcome, Mr. Vogel. Tanja Fajon also from the Socialist Party, Mr. Kovačev from EPP and Mr. Andreas Kesterix from DG Enlargement in charge for media also joining us today in a studio in the European Parliament. Let's start with you, Mr. Vogel. As I quoted your report, European Balkan Fund report, could you please give us an overview about the situation with the media freedom in the Western Balkans?
Well, as you just said, there has been a sharp decline in media freedom. There have been a few very high-profile cases recently of the authorities clamping down on freedom of expression. There was a case in Bosnia where the offices of an online portal were raided by police forces from both entities, who all of a sudden discovered that after all they can work together rather well. There have been cases where prime ministers were calling up reporters to complain about coverage. So it ranges all the way from police raids, confiscations, all the way to sort of intimidation at the very personal level. And what's remarkable about all this is that we've seen this in Bosnia-Herzegovina, we've seen it in Serbia, we've seen it in Macedonia. So there seems to be something going on really across the region, and I would argue this has something to do with the EU's reaction or lack thereof.
Madam Fajon, you have recently presented a report here in the European Parliament about the integrity of the media in the Western Balkans. We were able to read about the corrupt media, about the weak public services in the Western Balkans country. You were present in many meetings with the Balkans politicians. How do they explain what's going on in their countries? What's your diagnosis? What's the problem?
Yes, I hosted the conference recently where we discussed the media freedom in Western Balkan, and I share pretty much the information and the concern what is happening with the deterioration of media situation. On one hand, political pressure, as well on the other, economical pressure. There is not clear transparency of the ownership of the media, the whole circumstances and the environment in which media and journalists are working are very difficult. And of course we talk that all the time with the representatives of the government in the European Parliament.
How do they explain?
We always warn about the situation. I'm quite outspoken on what is happening in the media, but of course you always get a reaction. We are doing our utmost, we are adopting the legislation, we are trying, and you can say that in some cases there are some positive steps, but one is when you adopt the legislation, the other is what they are really doing, and the situation, what has been described, is certainly not a good one. I would like to emphasize as well, uncertainty in journalism, we have to ensure proper conditions, but on the other hand as well, media has an enormous responsibility. How they work and function, they are really shaping the society. They are the watchdog of what is happening in politics.
How to perform when
exactly,
they work in such environment?
The political elites and the governments, they have to ensure the proper conditions. And the media as well, they have to be, I would say, very organized as well, and to be outspoken what are these conditions they need to have.
Mr. Kovačev, two of the governments from the Western Balkans, Serbian and Macedonian governments, are ruled by the sister party of EPP. Do you have any discussion with them, I mean, in order to understand what's going on, having in mind all criticism raised in various international institutions?
Yes, indeed. Many times we discuss with all our partners about the situation and most important about the need of political will, not only verbally, because verbally everybody, all prime ministers and presidents will say yes.
Everybody's saying yes,
this
media
is for
freedom.
sure, and we are going to guarantee the transparent media environment and so on. But in practice we see that it's not the case. And how honest are these people? Are they really with the intention to European integration of their countries, or this is only a trick to win elections? Because sometimes we are adopting by what they are saying and the reality. And we have honest discussion with our partners about this. I cannot say I'm satisfied with the situation in all countries on the Western Balkans, but we see that in all places in the former communist countries, you have the mentality of this, how to say, the rulers, the politicians can interfere to the media to the media colleagues and journalists and ask for some benefits. You have also this corrupted, I will say, practice of advertisement when there is something like a contract between ministries or between the government and the media, so they are dependent economically from the money coming from the funds coming from the ministers or from the government in general, and for sure they are not willing to criticize the people from whom they receive their funds. So there are many such issues and problems, but the most important is the political will of the parties, of the ruling parties, but also of opposition to guarantee the media freedom.
Mr. Kesteris, you are dealing on a daily basis with the media problem in the Western Balkans in the office, your office in the DG Enlargement. What's your explanation why media freedom is declining despite all the encouragement that European Commission provided to the Western Balkans country? 6 recommendations for Macedonia to start negotiation, start of the negotiation with Serbia, and still, I mean, the situation is worsening.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the situation is necessarily worsening, but I'm dealing with the issue a bit more than 5 years.
That was noted in the progress report, by the way.
Yes, well, here's worsening, and I have seen very little progress over these 5 years. That's unfortunately the fact. In the context, I want to also reply to the statement by the colleague so that it's something to do with post-communist countries. Not necessarily. For instance, Estonia ranks very high on different media freedom indexes. So, and therefore, still, if we want to be serious, it's not so easy to answer why such a deterioration or little progress in the countries of Western Balkans. One thing is quite for sure. It has to do with general background, economic crisis 2008-2009. Then as the advertisement market dropped by around 40%. So media were significantly financially and economically weakened. And political circles, business circles, immediately took advantage of this situation. And then there is what you mentioned already, so role of government advertisement, so to say, which is channeled to the obedient media outlets, things like this. So
why European Commission is not able to stop some of these bad practices which are obvious?
Which, for instance?
Like you mentioned, you know, corrupt media by the people from the government, you know, ruling party.
Because it's first of all the task of the candidates and to be candidates themselves. We can only assist in this progress. We need to see clear commitment by the governments in these countries to improve the situation. And this I am saying very seriously. unless they want to do something themselves about this issue. So we won't be able to help. We can assist here and there. We can assist training of journalists according to the European standards. We can promote establishing self-regulatory bodies in these countries, like for instance recently in Macedonia, so ethics commission, if I'm not mistaken. That we can do, but unless there is a
no
real
political will?
Political, yes, and it's also public demand, so to say, for free media, because what we see, so to say, economic crisis led to deterioration of professional standards. It was spoiling the public. Tabloidization of the reading and viewing public. And then it's also, there is no clear demand for free media in these countries. This is most puzzling.
Let's talk about a very interesting point of Mr. Vogel. Mr. Vogel, in your report, as I mentioned in the introduction, you say that the EU overreaching the strategic goals in the region will trump concerns about fundamental freedoms. Could you elaborate a bit more about this attitude of the European Union and EU institutions?
Well, I think this was quite clearly visible in a statement by Commissioner Hahn last week, where he praised Prime Minister Vučić of Serbia for his constructive attitude in the talks with Kosovo, and in going over to Croatia for the inauguration of the new president, before answering a question about media freedom. And he answered that question by saying, I need proof, rumors aren't enough. Now, I appreciate as a philosophical point that a lot of media pressure is informal, it's difficult to prove. It is somebody picking up a phone, it's somebody placing an ad in this TV station rather than that. That's very difficult to prove in a sort of, you couldn't prove that in a court of law. I accept that. But to couch the statement in this language, after making reference to the sort of regional stability context, to me is a very clear signal. And the signal is, if the Vučićs of this world and the Gruevskis of this world behave in terms of regional stability, we will not be as strict with them when it comes to issues such as media freedom. I might be overinterpreting this, but this is the signal that was received also on the other end.
As a journalist, me and you, I think you're curious also to have a comment from you. Madam Fajon, Mr. Kovacev, Mr. Kesteris, on what Mr.
Very interesting point, but I can at least give reassurance that in the European Parliament we were almost on all the reports now very much emphasizing in all the debates and in the amendments and what has been adopted at the end, the media freedom and in the importance. So there was quite a debate on that and a lot of warnings. But it is true that on the other hand, the media landscape is as well changing a lot. What we heard about political pressure, what we heard about economic dependence from media and online media. So it's a lot of challenges for the media, not only in the Western Balkan, in the whole over Europe, what you mentioned as well. But it's one thing that you don't see many things. The other is that we have cases in the Western Balkan when journalists were assaulted, they were attacked, and the procedures at the courts, they never came to the end. For many cases today, we still know that there are open issues. And this is something where we can on and on appeal the governments to do more and to ensure the environment to work. But the challenges today are much greater for the media, that is certain.
Mr. Kovacev, on the same.
For me, one important point is what the colleagues mentioned already, the civil society and the need of the civil society, the request from the civil society for a transparent and fair media coverage. So with the social media, with Facebook, with Twitter, many citizens are now participating in information dissemination, and this will increase, I assume, in the future. That will be from bottom-up correction of the problems which are sometimes top-down created by rulers, by political influence. So to support the bottom, the civil society is very important also from our side, from the European institution side, to help these countries for better European and faster European integration. And one point also about stability and freedom. We cannot pay stability to have stability and then we will not be so sharp on media freedom. This is something like what we had in so-called Arab Spring. So there was stable these dictators and now they are not there. We have now chaos. We cannot say if the governments in Macedonia or in Serbia are stable and the regional stability is guaranteed, then we are not going to look about freedom of media and how they are implementing their power, especially in our continent. I'm not talking about Egypt. So this is a very important point.
Madam Fayon, yes.
What a short remark, my impression, I often travel to all the countries of the Western Balkans and I'm impressed to see how many media are there. In some small countries, it's enormous amount of media, and of course in difficult economic situation it's difficult to understand how they can survive. So it's clear that they have financial sources.
They've been created by purpose, if I may say.
And I often ask as well, is there some media that it's really independent I would like to talk to? And I have to admit that I always get no clear answer. It's very, very obvious to whom some media belong in the Balkans.
Mr. Kessler is as a representative of the Commission. What's your comment about Mr. Vogel's point about
very willingly.
Overreaching the street?
Yes, so what you already said, so there is no contradiction between stability and free media, because eventually free and critical media contribute to transparency of the political establishment and therefore thereby to more stability. But what you said, so we even mentioned in several progress reports that slamming in public critical media is not something belonging to the European political culture. And that normally politicians should exercise higher level of tolerance in face of media criticism than, let's say, normal citizens. But that we have even so written down in the progress report in the case of a couple of countries. But there is another side. I asked a gentleman who is a quite active journalist and also within the media community in Macedonia. And Macedonia was very famous for having very high numbers of defamation cases under the penal code. So in 2011 it was 290 cases where charges against critical journalists were pushed by the politicians. And I asked the gentleman, so how does it come that he never got sued? And he said simply that he knows how to present his criticism. It means also that I think we have to pay attention to the professionality of critical journalists as well. So, and that's what, as I already mentioned, so we need to...
We'll talk later about this. Let's go on the ground on Skype from Serbia. Gordana Igrić, editor-in-chief of BIRN, join us from Belgrade. BIRN is a Balkan investigative network report. BIRN looks like it's very angry with the last statement of Commissioner Hahn. How do you comment this statement of Commissioner Hahn? No proof of political pressure or proof are obvious, but Commissioner Hahn don't want to see them. Gordana.
Yeah. I would say that it took us for surprise. The statement was completely unacceptable. Unacceptable because it sent a message to and civil society groups and some media with no big influence, but still trying to keep going on with the reporting, that we will be sacrificed somehow due to the kind of higher and more pragmatic political goals. Obviously, in Serbia, there is almost everyday shrinking space for democratic debate and for critical voices. And as such, for us was very surprising to hear that we need more proof than it is actually already happening. Proof. We have daily institutions that are hijacked by the government and media used to basically ruin them. Latest, we have a pattern of attack on Ombudsman. We have a war crime prosecutor warned by the president. We have Humanitarian Law Center also attacked because of the war crimes of some general committed in the 90s. So there is a pattern. And of course, let me remind you, BN as such had a terrible, terrible campaign, dirty campaign ran against during the January for 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, Gordana, thank you very much for your remark. Mr. Kovachev, you wanted to comment something about what Gordana said.
To add something what is specific, the colleague said about not all former communist country has the same destiny, but especially in former Yugoslavia or in the Balkan, we have the phenomenon of non-historical reconciliation or no willingness for historical reconciliation, and in the financial, economical, media, political sphere, a lot of people involved in the former secret communist police agents or officers are still acting, and this is the fact which we should be transparent and open to say this. Serbia even didn't like to open the archive of UDBA and KOS. And this is a big problem because Serbia should also give these archives to the former Yugoslav republics, to Macedonia, to Slovenia, to Croatia and so on, which are related to the history of these countries.
Mr. Vogel, do you want to add something on what Gordana said?
Well, I think she's absolutely right. I mean, you know, if Commissioner Hahn needs proof, all he needs to do is pick up the phone and talk to a few people in Serbia. I mean, that's and in other countries of the region. But
I think to go to meet them.
Indeed, indeed. Again, I don't want to over-interpret what he said, but I do think that there's a very important point there, which is that it seems to me that the European Commission and the EU more generally is underestimated, and I would make an exception actually for the European Parliament in this, is underestimating the role of politics in all of this. We have the acquis, we go in the negotiations through all the chapters, we tick a few boxes. But that's not really the substance of the problem. The substance of the problem here is that we have entrenched political elites who are not willing to give away their power. And one very, probably the single most important tool in that power struggle is the media.
Madam Fayon?
Partially has been mentioned. We don't have mechanisms in European Union to control and influence really directly on the media law. Why I'm saying that? We were in the last years discussing in the parliament the media law in Hungary, in Italy, what has been happening in other countries of the European Union, and we don't have clear mechanisms how to influence on the media law, what to do when we see that, especially in the case of Hungary, for example, we had and the Commission had no really mechanism what to do. We had all international organizations warning about the really bad law on media that is limiting the freedom in Hungary, but in fact we couldn't do much except of some minor technical adaptations. And this is something where we will have to see what we can do in the future, what would be the influence of the institutions, how far we can go, because this is the question of democracy as well, the freedom of speech, the freedom of media. And even when we talk about the democracy, we see that we have a big lack of democracy in Europe. We have no mechanisms how to control democracies in our countries.
So, because of this weakness of the European Union, it looks like the statement of Mr. Hahn is just justification for their attitude not being able to intervene. So what kind of proof the Commission needs in order to adjust?
Yes.
the approach towards the Serbian government when we are speaking?
Well, I
we
think
are talking about the
we have been consistently critical about different aspects of media situation in Serbia. And so the short story about developments over the last years was that with our Commission's and the EU's strong support, there was adoption of media development strategy in Serbia a couple of years ago. Then according to this strategy, so they had to amend substantially their legislation, which they did last year. And in this context, and if you ask, so how you would deal with this or that problem in the media landscape, we were immediately referred. It will be taken care of by this Media 3 law package. And now in summer this year, we are planning a peer review mission going down there to Serbia to analyze the situation, what is implementation of this wonderful package.
So that will looking for a proof. Exactly. Okay, let's go with another example. Journalist from Skopje, Tomislav Kežarovski, journalist sentenced to 4.5 years prison in the first instance. The court accused him of illegal disclosure of protected witness despite evidence that the witness was not protected when Kežarovski published the article. Tomislav Kežarovski, how do you explain the court sentence?
За одбележување е фактот дека судот во ниту еден момент не ги ценеше, не ја ценеше содржината, не се осврна на содржината на текстовите за што ми беше поднесена кривична пријава, па подоцна обвинение и за што сум осудена. Имено ниту еднаш Судскиот совет не се осврна на содржината на текстовите, а уште помалку наспроти укажувањата на мојот адвокат никој пат не дозволи или не даде наредба да се одгонатне дилемата кога заштитениот или загрозен сведок, што подоцна беше утврдено дека во суштина бил, го подпишал документот за спогодба со обвинителството. Според нашите сознанија, тоа го сторил во 2010 година, дури и самиот тој призна во изјавата дадена пред истражен судија и во едно интервју за дневниот вестник Нова Македонија дека спогодбата со обвинителството да се јави во својство на заштитен сведок ја подпишал, ми се чини, кон крајот на 2010 година, што значи тоа е сторено 2 години по објавувањето на моите текстови. Зошто судот не го ценеше овој факт, овој податок, навистина никој пат не е јасно. Значи судот постапи спротивно на барањето на мојот адвокат со наредба да добие од Министерството за внатрешни работи или од обвинителството кога заштитениот, односно загрозениот сведок подпишал согласно да сведочи во својство на заштитен сведок.
Томислав, ти благодарам за вклучувањето. So, it's a problem with the rule of law.
Yes, and in this case, I think the Commission in longer term might be helpful. This rather, I assume that Macedonia has ratified the Human Rights Convention, European Human Rights Convention. Good. And normally, so to say, once ratified, these international agreements have priority over the national laws. And the Article 10 of Human Rights Convention speaks about media freedom. And then it's up to judges and prosecutors is to apply their understanding, adequate understanding to these concrete cases. So whatever national laws are saying, the priority belongs to the Article 10 and Human Rights Court case law. For that, so judges and prosecutors need to be properly trained to understand proportionality of all these things, balance between data protection and free expression, things like this. So that would be my explanation.
Briefly, Madam Fajon and Mr. Kovachev.
At the end of the day, I would just say, on a specific case, I don't want to comment. I would always say it should be an investigation, a proper investigation, independent investigation, and a decision that should be respected by the court. But when it comes to back to the political situation and media, I would say it is really up to the authorities to ensure the environment in each of the countries. And maybe be aware that today maybe you are in the government, next day you will be in the opposition, so you have to secure the environment where the media freedom and freedom of speech is the basic of democracy and functioning country.
Mr. Kovachev, could we expect the EPP is finally going to speak with their partners, I mean, sister party in the Balkans?
We are speaking
openly with them.
We are speaking with
some
everybody,
problem.
And we see that the media freedom, the situation of the journalists are linked to the rule of law, to the implementation of the law, to the praxis of the judges, because this is a problem not only for Macedonia or for Serbia, also for member states of the European Union, like my country recently. Also very strange cases coming from some judges who give to the former Minister of Foreign Affairs 4 years only for a very minor issue. So you have in every country some judges, especially in new member states or in Western Balkan, who are questionable. But you have also the problem that the independence of the judicial system, and if as a politician you say something against a judge decision, you are in a very uncomfortable situation. This is like a death or like the devil's situation, a circle. Because this is a very, very high important issue. How the judges implement the law, and what are the dependence? We saw about the dependence of the media, but what are the dependence of the judges as well?
Toby Vogel, to close this debate, what should be next? How to adjust? What are the recommendations?
Well, I agree that obviously it's really primarily up to the authorities in these countries to, not to bully the media. That would be a good start, for prime ministers not to call up critical journalists and so on. But, we live in a world where we have established liberal democracies going after journalists in order to uncover their sources. We live in a world where we have established liberal democracies use anti-terrorist laws to clamp down on certain aspects of free expression. So I'm afraid our capacity to serve as a model is perhaps not as great as it once was. In a more concrete sense, I do think that the EU should be more forceful in systematically focusing on issues of freedom of media, because they tie in, as we've just been hearing, with broader issues of the rule of law and with the substance really of what it means to be a genuine democracy.
Okay, Mr. Vogel, thank you. Madam Fajon, Mr. Kovachev, Mr. Kester, thank you to participate in this debate. You have watched the Balkan Forum in the studio of the European Parliament dedicated to the media freedom in the Western Balkans. Thank you.